All right, are we good to go? I believe we are. So, hello there, my lovely ladies. I hope you all are doing well. Hola, bonjour, all of the good stuff. All right. You already know it's me, Coach V, the New Love Strategist with New Thing Life Coaching. And as you can see from the title, this is a very random video. Okay. Like it's not even a training video, it's not like a prerequisite to anything. I wanted to pop on really just based off of a random conversation, not even random conversation, but a conversation that I've actually had with a couple of different men over the span of I don't even know, like one guy was back from like a couple of years ago, and I thought it was very interesting, so I just wanted to talk about it, talking about why it might seem as if some men misunderstand you. And even though this isn't like a typical video that I would do, I am going to like I have like a little bit of notes in front of me because a lot of this is stemming from a conversation that I had just the other night, and I just wanted to hop on and talk about it. I know for some of you, like if you've been single for a long time or for some time, and I mean single, like as in like, not in a committed relationship. I know that some of you have been what I used to be as far as a serial dating shipper, right? Where it's like, yeah, you've maybe been dating someone and then that didn't work out. You're dating someone else and that didn't work out. You're dating somebody else. But again, nothing ever official, so to speak. So if you've been somebody who's fallen into that boat, then I know that it can sometimes seem as if none of these men get you. It's like none of them really understand you. Like you just feel frustrated with dating. You might feel a little bit misunderstood. You feel like sometimes men don't quite even understand exactly what it is you offer and things like that. And the reason I wanted to speak on some of this is really, truth be told, because of an interesting conversation that I actually had with my honey the other day. All right. Yes, I'm talking about something that me and Mr. K were talking about. And we actually were on the phone talking about this for a while because like we just get into deep conversations all the time. And having the conversation with him, it was almost kind of like deja vu. And I say that only because I had also had a conversation with my neighbor, my bestie, Paul. Me and him kind of had a similar conversation about this a few months ago as well, even though it was like kind of on a little bit different in nature, but I feel like generally speaking, it was still kind of the same thing or whatever. And then there was also a guy that I dated several years ago, and me and him, he's a little, he got some issues. So the conversation with him was a little bit heated because he was just very arrogant, narcissistic, like true narcissist, like gaslighting the whole nine. And it just did not go very well. And he just feels like he has the answers to everything. So that was a completely different thing. So three different men that I've had a conversation with that kind of revolves around the same thing. And it was very interesting to hear their points of view regarding the issue at hand and me having to shed some light so that they could get a better understanding of things all in all. But ultimately, let me just go ahead and say so, me and Mr. K, what we were ultimately talking about was women repeating a lot of the same ways and a lot of the same habits and cycles in their relationships. And what we were even, I don't even remember like exactly how we got on it, how we got on this conversation. And actually, I do know how we got on it. So me and him, like, I was just kind of looking at houses, like his work schedule and everything. Like, we've been planning whatever, as far as like future and stuff like that. So because of his work schedule, so I've been, doing some of the, looking at houses and stuff. And then I have a friend of mine who they're, like he's in a relationship or whatever as well. And, like Mr. K was kind of asking, like, oh, so what's going on with so and so? And, are they looking at houses as well? Or, are they looking to get married? Like, we just always kind of like check in as far as everybody's relationships are concerned and stuff like that. And I was like, well, no, they're not really looking to get married. They're just really focused on just moving in together because right now, between the two of them, they actually have 5 marriages behind them. I was like, and it's actually the woman who was married 3 times. I was like, and the guy was actually married 2 times. So, we were just kind of chit chatting about that a little bit. And I think, and for him, he was like, oh, like that's kind of tough. I can understand someone being married, like 1 time before, but 2 times maybe. When it gets to be 3 times, he's like, okay, at some point you got to realize, okay, something might be wrong with that person. He's like, I don't think I could ever date a woman who has actually been married 3 times because that is somebody, he's like, really just in general, he's like, man or woman, you've been married multiple times, and to not realize that something might be wrong with you. Like there's some type of issue and that you might be the problem or whatever else the case might be. And it was interesting to hear him say that. And of course, doing what I do for a living, he knows that I work with single Christian women. He knows that I'm a dating coach, relationship coach, life coach, all of that. He does not really quite understand the depths of my actual client base and exactly, like the full realm of exactly, how deep I go, which he's a man, he don't care about none of that stuff anyway. Like, why would he care to know about some of those things, right? So in that case, his whole thing, me trying to get him to understand, well, you have to understand that there are things that people go through, and it's why we show up a certain way in our relationships. It's why we date the way that we do. It's why some of our relationships go the way that they do. It's why you can be in a relationship or even a marriage with somebody for several months, several years, whatever. It doesn't work out. Boom. Next thing you know, you're moving on all over again. And, me trying to also get him to understand, like, hey, when it comes to, sorry, I keep moving, but trying to get them to understand. So like when it comes to, again, the daddy issues, when it comes to abandonment issues, there are things that people have actually dealt with in their past, and those things affect us. So especially if it's something that took place when you're like a child, especially like our childhood and things like that, when there are certain things that we end up enduring and going through, it's hard to just forget about it. Like it's hard to just act like it never happened. But what he was saying was that he realizes that a lot of times people spend too much time dwelling in the past and that they don't know how to let things go. And it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, it's like I get, a lot of people have been through things, but it's, you kind of got to realize like you can't really let it hold you back. And again, the reason that it was interesting hearing him say that is because my friend had made the same comment as well. Again, we were talking not necessarily about romantic relationships, but truth be told, we were talking about children, and how, even like kids today, how, again, he's a little bit more old school, add in military, and stuff like that. So, of course, for him, it's like, I mean, yeah, it's like, kids today are spoiled and da 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 da, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, well, I get that. But you also have to realize that right now, kids are also dealing with things that we've never dealt with before. And right now, depression is at an all-time high when it comes to adolescents, when it comes to teenagers, when it comes to children. There have been wait lists for therapists, there have been wait lists for psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, the whole nine. And a lot of people are backed up right now. And then you also have to take into consideration that a lot of people in the mental health field, because of their own mental health strains, a lot of those people are also leaving the field and walking away, which is really putting a strain on those who are, looking to, those who are actually looking to get help. So it's like we have all of these different factors that are already affecting children. And this is what I was trying to explain to my best friend. We have all of these different things already. And then it's like, I feel like when the pandemic came, a lot of us were focused on how it affected us as moms, how it affected a lot of people as employees, as teachers. I felt like all of these different things, it put strains on households. Like the divorce rates went through the roof during the pandemic as well. But then I realized that no one really thought about how it affected the children. And we always say, oh, well, children are so resilient, or, oh, well, children just need to do whatever we tell them to do. Well, they don't really have, it's like we forget that kids can feel things as well and things affect them as well. So again, when me and my best friend, we were kind of discussing and talking about that, I was like, no one really thinks about what children experience. They literally were pulled apart from everything that they know. They were pulled out of school. They were pulled away from their friends. They're now in the house and being forced, be in front of computers or whatever and stuff like that. And of course, in his thing, he's like, I mean, that's just how it goes. And kids today, they're just too soft and da 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 da. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you know the things that I went through when I was a child, and my daddy did this and my mama did this, and I remember being 16 years old and I did this, and by the time I turned 17, it was deuces, and once I turned 18, it was da 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 da. And look at me now, and I survived and I made it. I'm like, okay, but how do you define survived? Because let's be real about some things. I know you, and just because you're here, just because you're, oh, what? Because you own a home, because you might be financially stable. Like we have warped ways on how we actually view survival. A lot of people think just because they're living, or what, just because you're financially okay, that you made it. Okay, yeah, you might be surviving, but you're not thriving. And especially in a case where there are some mental and emotional issues, then again, you're surviving, but you're not thriving. So, us having that conversation, really getting him to understand a lot of things, because he too is one of those that people dwell on the past and, wanting to talk about resilience. And so this takes me back to a guy that I dated several years ago as well. We had a conversation about it. He was actually asking questions and concerned, not concerned, but wanted to know, okay, so tell me exactly what it is that you do, what kind of women do you help, and maybe we can do a podcast together, just kind of talking about those things. So, me letting him know, like, yeah, I'm a dating coach. I work with single Christian women. I work with women who, primarily my client base, they do have some type of childhood trauma, whether it's daddy issues, mama trauma, some type of assault, some type of betrayal, molestation, whether it is, rejection sensitivity, anxious attachment style. I work with ladies that fall in that group, in that category, and that is why they struggle with their romantic relationships. Because again, when things happen to you as a child, there's a little girl that's inside of you that you take that into all of your relationships. It's why you can have an anxious attachment style. It's why you end up almost like craving love and attention and whatever else. He too was pretty much saying the same thing, talking about resilience, and you have to really kind of learn how to get over certain things. And of course he was going into how he taught like a master resiliency course or whatever when he was in the army, and how it pretty much teaches you that you can bounce back from everything, and how we need to stop being defined by the past. And again, three different men, three different categories, and trying to speak with all of them to try to get them to understand. And I'm like, man, like, this is why dating can be a little bit ghetto, because at the end of the day, a lot of men don't even understand us. Things that to them it might seem like we might be being, needy, or we're just always dwelling on the past. And I'll admit that is something that Mr. K has said to me before. He's like, it seems like you tend to, be stuck in the past, and he's definitely gotten on me before as far as like some of the overthinking, which I can say even just throughout the course of our relationship. Like, I have gotten, your girl has been doing the work. Like, I've gotten very whatever when it comes to overthinking. But just listening to the three of them say those things, and just realizing how a lot of people really just don't get it at the end of the day. They don't realize how things from the past really can have like a serious hold on us at the end of the day. And when my boyfriend and I were talking about it, because of course for him, he was like, not really understanding, again, talking about the whole marriage thing. And he's like, I just don't see how it is that women can make the same decisions repeatedly when it comes to dating and when it comes to relationships. How do you not at some point realize, okay, I need to change something? And who was I talking to recently? I was talking to somebody recently, and we were talking about two men that we know and how they bounce back very quickly, from divorce. And how a lot of times it takes women a longer time to rebuild. I'm like, okay, well, men are typically doers. Like, they're just like boom, 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 got to get it done. They're not really going to focus on their emotions. And again, I'm not trying to throw my best friend under the bus, but trying to get him to understand he falls in that category as well. A lot of times it's like, okay, I got to make this happen. It's easy for me to get my bread back up, to, get restabilized and whatever else the case might be, because for them, they are doers. They are a little bit more logical, whereas women are more emotional. So we don't think that way when it comes to bouncing back after something happens. And so when it comes to, again, making the bad decisions, of course, a lot of men, because of certain things that they feel, certain things that they experience, and how they process things, all it takes for them is one time, typically, because again, I'm not going to generalize all men and all women, but a lot of times with men, all it takes is one time for them to actually experience something that they never want to experience again. Think about it. If you think about whether it's financial instability, whether it's heartbreak or anything like that, again, divorce, whatever, the chances are you are going to find a man who has gone through that only one time, maybe twice. But then a lot of times you will find that women, they've gone through it repeatedly, where they've maybe repeatedly had seasons of financial instability, or they have repeatedly engaged in some type of toxic cycle or habit when it comes to their dating life or when it comes to a relationship. It's how a woman can repeatedly end up in an abusive relationship or situation. It's how a woman can end up repeatedly dating a man who is a cheater or a narcissist or anything like that. There are reasons why people end up repeating a lot of things, but again, people who have never experienced it, or maybe just because they're wired a little bit differently, they don't understand it. Now, I always say that there's only one common denominator in equations that all look the same. So again, when you realize that it's something that you've gone through time and time again, whether it's in a different relationship, a different job, a different state, whatever, but it's like, I've always gone through this no matter what. So I always say at some point you have to establish, when you're the common denominator. And that's what me and, Kay were talking about as well. I'm just like, okay, at some point, that is what a lot of people do end up missing, not realizing, okay, sometimes it takes a while. Because again, mind you, it took me years. Like it was not until I was like in my early or mid 30s before I realized, like, okay, me and dating ain't working out very well. All of these situations are starting to look the same. And truth be told, and in my case, it wasn't even until God had spoke to me as far as sex was concerned. It was almost like for me, that was that aha moment of, okay. That was like, for me, I thought it was just random. I was like, okay, so God wants me to give up sex. Okay, cool. I'll give up sex. It is no problem. And then it was like him showing me, okay, but the reason that you're having sex with these men, you're doing it because you want a husband, but none of these men are even your husband. They're not even trying to be your husband. None of these men have even committed to you at all. So it was like that moment that it was like, okay, wait a minute, like what is going on here? And then of course the guy that I did end up dating, and ultimately it was because we didn't have sex that caused that relationship to end. And so it's like, even when I almost lost my mind after us breaking up, it was like, okay, what was that? Why did you almost lose your mind? Like what is really going on here? So it took a while for me to get to that point of realizing, okay, in all of these failed relationships, Victoria, you have been the common denominator. So what is going on and where is this coming from? What are you chasing? What are you hoping to attain? What is really going on? So me trying to get these three men to understand the key thing in all things of repeating unhealthy cycles is trauma. And I know that trauma is that word that is starting to get used a little bit more and more, right? If we can be honest. But I feel like, again, because people really don't understand it and they don't understand what all it entails, I feel like at one point when we would use the word trauma, we would use it to talk about something very violent in nature, maybe something um, maybe physically jarring or even scarring in nature, maybe something sexual. Like we almost associate it like it had to be something major. When you think about us talking about like traumatic events, like it had to be a major issue in order for it to constitute as trauma. No, trauma is anything that is deeply disturbing or distressing that happens to a person that they were not expecting to happen. So that can be anything. That can be a parent leaving the home. That can be a parent that's not present. That can be a parent that died. That can be a relationship ending. That can be a divorce. Like that can be anything. Like trauma comes in all forms. It is anything that you experience that you were not expecting to experience. And it distressed and disturbed you in some way. And yet, even if it means it happened when you were a child, I always talk about the scientific aspects where trauma literally affects your brain. Trauma determines how your brain is going to develop, especially if it's something that you endured at a younger age. So if it's something that you end up going through and then you never actually work through it, then of course that ends up meaning that it is going to affect how you live and how you do life. Like any of you who were in New Heart Academy with me, like you already know that there's like one whole class just on rewiring your brain. Like I literally talk about the effects that trauma has on the brain. And that's what I was telling my boyfriend as well, how what I have to do is literally I have to take my ladies through like a system shock, and you literally have to rewire the brain. You have to like bring all that trauma back to the surface, because if you don't deal with it, you will repeat it. That is why a woman can stay in an abusive relationship for some time. It's not always because they don't have a plan. It's not always about them not having money. It's because abuse comes in cycles and waves. Where an abuser, they are also great manipulators. So it's like they can end up abusing a person, whether it is physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and or sexually. They can end up abusing that person, inflicting that pain on that person. And then, of course, they end up making nice, apologizing, whether it's money, whether it's roses, whether it's jewelry, whether it's an outfit, whether it's physical touch, which can still end up being a person who is the victim of abuse. Physical touch can still be their love language as well. So if you have your abuser now manipulating you and loving on you with kisses and sex or whatever else, and whether they are or aren't promising that it's never going to happen again. But now the victim knows how they feel, because now you have your brain that is releasing all of those hormones, all of those endorphins, the feel good hormones. And it's like, now you're okay. And it's like, yeah, deep down, it's like, that that abuse is probably going to come again at some point. But it's like at this point, now you're on that high. And eventually, yeah, when the abuse comes again, you're going to be on that low. But now your brain is already programmed like, okay, but I already know that the high is going to come at some point. At some point, I'm going to be in love again. At some point, that dopamine is going to be released and everything is going to be good. So that is a person who is now actually become addicted to drama and trauma. Like you literally can become addicted to drama and trauma. And that is why they will find themselves in that repeated pattern with just one guy, or that is how someone can come out of an abusive relationship and they will find themselves right back in an abusive relationship. Again, and so it's not even just men, but there are women who don't understand that as well. Like, ain't no way, couldn't be me. Ain't no man gonna put their hands on me, or you only got one time and I'll never be. Nobody ever grows up and says, one day I see myself being in an abusive relationship. Nobody ever thinks it's going to be them. Nobody plans for that. Now, yeah, of course, obviously there are women who know all it would take is one time. I know people that it only took, one time and that was it. But at the same time, again, it is arrogant to have an opinion in the area of something that you've never walked through, or just because it doesn't make sense to you, you don't understand how somebody else can find themselves in that same category. Like I was telling him, I was like, it is the same thing. Even like I told my best friend, it is the same thing when, as he understands, how a person who can be in the military, who can be in a full-fledged combat zone, I mean, like bombs over Baghdad, how they can end up going through all of that and how you can come out of that. And then it's like, if there's an opening, or whatever, like if there's an opportunity to even go back into a war zone, you're actually ready to sign up for it. You went through something traumatic and your brain is still just kind of like. And then when you think about it from that aspect, think about um, military personnel, and especially men, even though they have a lot of the mental health stuff available to them, that is seen as a weakness. That was something, a study that was even done decades ago as far as that was concerned, but that was seen as a weakness to do something even as far, oh my God, like looking at a lot of the history of post-traumatic stress disorder when it comes to military people, it is disheartening. Like when I was actually studying that, a lot of it, like it made me so sad the way that they were trying to cure it when it was finally starting to be real. Like, okay, these people are kind of coming back a little bit. Because like the women, the wives were just like, okay, my husband, he's different. Something is going on. After a couple of people, once it was finally realized that what was going on, the way that they were even attempting to treat it for those that even were willing to try to get treated. Because again, it was seen and is still now seen as a weakness. This is why we have a lot of male veterans and females too, but predominantly males who are walking around just whatever, because in their mind, no, I'm not getting help for that. So here it is, my friend who's also veteran. I'm like, you should understand this. You should, but I also see how you don't. But again, some people, they cannot wrap their heads around how people can find themselves in the same situations over and over and over again. Like I said, in New Heart Academy, it's literally rewiring the brain, because our brains are affected by trauma. And so what some people don't understand, so what Kay and I were talking about, and me explaining to him daddy issues. Okay. So, and I will use, his story as well. And I know he's not watching because he's texting me right now. So I know that his father passed at a young age. Um, and of course, in my case, my father left the home at a young age. So we're really, age wise, we were not that far apart when both of us are now dealing with a father who is no longer in the home. Obviously, it's different. One is death, one is divorce or separation or whatever, but either it's still the same. Like it still causes abandonment issues at the end of the day. But then it's also keeping in mind I'm a female, he's a man. So then again, we have all of the biological factors that also have to come into play as to whatever's going to be going on. So of course for him, you're a man and whatever else. So now you've probably already developed. He was older when his father passed. So, I'm sure, of course, men, they're all about teaching their boys, fight back, you bounce back from anything, be resilient, don't let anything affect you, you don't dwell in the past, keep it pushing. Whereas little girls, that's the first place that we really learn what love is all about. It's from our fathers. So a little girl who grows up and doesn't have a father in the house, the father's now gone. Again, when I was 3 years old, that's trauma. That's trauma because a central person who is supposed to provide for you and love you and take care of you, who is now gone, that is a traumatic thing that a woman ends up experiencing. Again, whether the daddy moved out, whether it was divorce, whether it was death. Now, so he was trying to understand, okay, but can those two really compare? I mean, if one is death, okay, but that means the father, they didn't leave you, they didn't choose to die. Of course, obviously I was trying to be mindful of, how I was whatever, knowing that in that situation, that's, of course, what he was experiencing. But at the same time, no, it doesn't. Yeah, it's different, literally speaking, but technically it's still the same. A child who is experiencing a parent who is gone, the brains process it the same exact way. The only thing that they is that whatever. And even as I was explaining one thing in my situation, even as an adult. So someone who at that point had not yet even worked through abandonment issues, I was 30 when my mom passed away. So being in the hospital room with her, and of course, she whatever. So, she was already at that point on life support. I remember being in the hospital room with her one day, begging her, like, just please, like, not now, Dolores. Like, this is not the time. Like, I need you. Please, I need you to fight. Like, come on back, da 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 da. And I remember at one point, like, seeing the teardrop come out of her eye. So for me, it was like, okay, that's letting me know that you can hear me. You can hear what I'm saying. So for her to still pass away, I think the very next day, that just like magnified the abandonment issues that I had from my father. Because when I was like, okay, you heard me. You heard me begging. Now, of course, in my mind, I was just thinking about like the whole Lamar Odom thing had just taken place like right around that same time. So I remember, Lamar Odom, granted it was overdose. I remember he was on life support. I remember, like they had increased the different, the propofol and the Ketra or whatever, the different medications and whatever else. I knew it was something that he had, come out of. So for me, it was like, okay, so they can do the same thing for her. And then mama can come out of this and everything's going to be fine and da 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 da. So when it didn't happen, for me, it was just like, okay, you left me. Now I've been abandoned again. So now I have that little girl who's now being awakened and she's angry. She's hurt. She's frustrated. She's confused. She doesn't understand because it was like, okay, so you were not even good enough for daddy to stay in the house. And now you're being reminded like even your own mama didn't want to fight for you. And I explained some of this to him, but again, that is how an abandoned brain and an abandoned heart, that is how they think. That is how your brain is processed. Again, because if you have not actually been rewired, if you didn't realize anything, that is what's going on. So I say all that to say, now imagine me taking all of that into romantic relationships. Because now it's a matter of I have deep rooted abandonment issues because of both of those situations. So that is the person that showed up in all of the relationships. Now, mind you, like I've talked about before, when my mom was alive, it was one of those things where so her and my dad, they were already separated. My mom didn't have no man in the house or whatever. So I just saw her taking care of us and making it look easy. So I always had it drilled in my mind that I didn't need a man, but of course the little girl inside of me desperately wanted a man. So I was confused. I was jacked up when I was in a lot of my relationships the whole time. I was just like all over the place, and men could not understand me at all. It was like, okay, look, she got it all going on, da 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 da. But then it was like after a while, they were trying to figure out like, okay, like what's up with you? Because they couldn't sometimes understand my emotional responses to certain things. They sometimes I know that I came off as being emotionally unstable, but it was like all I wanted was to be loved. All I wanted was to be held. All I wanted to be was, assured that I was good enough. I wanted to be assured that they were not going to leave me. Sometimes I would subconsciously do things to, to push them away to see if they were going to leave, just like if finally them like, see, I knew you were like the rest, you were going to leave anyway. Like I was all over the place, like the way that I would react and respond if someone did not call as soon as they said they were going to call, text when they said they were going to, if I didn't get to see them at a time that I thought I was going to see them, if they didn't make me like all the way top of the list priority. I see how some women can be and why they are the way they are with wanting to hear from a man every day, even early on in the dating stages. For me, I was that way only because I needed to know that I mattered to somebody. Now, the crazy thing is, I mean, yeah, maybe sometimes I did like the person, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes, like, I kind of like them, and then it was like, yeah, it was really just a matter of, it doesn't matter how much I like you. I need you to be in love with me. Because that's just how, but I was so misunderstood. But at the same time, it was also because there were things that I had not dealt with. Our brains literally end up being affected by trauma. And now we end up having these trauma responses with the way that we react to people, with the way that we respond, with the way that we handle things. And I can admit, I've definitely had some things that would creep up a little bit at the top of our relationship, and me explaining to him like, okay, look, I'm sorry, so the reason I responded this way was, so it hurt my feelings when you did this, or I really thought this was going to happen, or oh, because when I said this, I wanted you to respond this way. And he would let me know like, sweetie, I'm not a mind reader, right? Okay, like we're getting to know each other, like we've both gone through some stuff in our past, so like you're going to have to communicate and tell me. But that was hard for me to do, and I'm like, okay, so this is my first healthy relationship, a man who's actually telling me to express my feelings, and I don't know how to do this. Like it's like I knew how, but it's like I didn't want you, so I'd always have to like cringe and fight my way through it. But it was me explaining to him certain things about myself, because our attachment styles play a large part as well. Our attachment styles show up in relationships as well. Like a lot of people fall in one of three categories, where either you have an anxious attachment style, an avoidant attachment style, or a secure attachment style. Those who have any type of childhood trauma, and if you have abandonment issues, you are either anxious or avoidant. Anxious, you attach very, very quickly. Um, you'll stay in a relationship like well past the expiration date. You'll find yourself moving on very quickly if a relationship ends. Sometimes having, like I said, that willingly having unwanted sex just to keep a person around, like because just the thought of someone not loving you or you not being enough, like you will find yourself people pleasing, the whole nine. So people who suffer from childhood trauma are either anxious attachment styles or avoidant, where it's like you lack the depths, you lack being able to be emotionally intimate, where in some cases it's like you like a person, but it's like as soon as you start to like really catch feelings, you pull away. It's like two steps forward, three steps back. The same guy who I dated a couple of years ago, the same one who was in the army and talking about being resilient, whatever else, he was actually, he was an avoidant. And it's funny because to say that he was somebody who was always talking about, getting over stuff and not letting things define you, he had PTSD and he also had abandonment issues. But again, it just goes to show how some people, for it's like everybody handles things differently. So it was frustrating because he misunderstood me and he couldn't understand me, but it's like I understood him so well. So of course, my mind was like, dude, like we could be perfect, but it's like you don't even realize that you're messing us up. But one thing you cannot have, if you think that you're actually going to have a healthy relationship, you cannot have one person who's anxious attachment style and one person who's avoidant. It is not going to work at all, because then we also have things that activate our attachment systems, because it's how we do relationships based on how we were parented, in infancy. And then, of course, a lot of stuff from childhood trauma as well. And then it's like factor into some of the trauma that becomes different choices and scenarios and circumstances throughout life that can also shape us. So it's like we have this like boatload of stuff like all over the place at the end of the day. It's so easy for men to misunderstand us, right? That's just how it is. Okay. And again, and don't come from a man either, okay? Because like I said, I wanted to really talk. Like it was just so interesting having that conversation with him. And of course, obviously, like it wasn't like an argument or a disagreement. It wasn't even a debate. He was genuinely just not understanding, and I was quiet, which is rare. But I was quiet. I just let him talk, and I just wanted to hear his thoughts and how he really viewed all of it, so that I could use that as a teachable moment, so that I could really enlighten him. And I could tell that me sharing things with him, it was like, oh wow, like that's crazy. Like, I would have never thought, or, and him even saying like, okay, funny because I actually, I dated a girl before and I could not figure out why she would, do XYZ or, whatever else. And, so me even being able to explain things to him about women and about women that he dated in the past, like I've always had to do that with men, because I'll have men who come to me and it's like, hey, let me ask you a question. Like, okay, so I got this lady and, she's confusing me and I don't really understand this and da 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 da. This is a lot of men just don't understand us at the end of the day. Again, it is easy to not understand what you've never endured, but it is arrogant to dismiss it or discredit it. And I think, and that's why, again, I love him so much, because he was willing to be taught, right? Like he was actually willing to learn about it and to understand. My best friend is the same way. We have these conversations all the time where we can, viewpoints and debates and whatever else. The other guy, there was no whatever. But for him, it was just like, no, this is my way, and this is how it's going to be, and no wonder we didn't work. So talking to three different men, and it's like having the same conversation. And again, funny because two of them who have PTSD and abandonment issues. But then yet both of them are the same ones who were talking about being resilient and just getting over it. But then not even realizing that both of them have also showed up the exact same way in their romantic relationships. But I'm going to leave that alone. It really just goes into, again, how trauma can affect the brain and how you have to rewire afterwards. But it also goes to show how men and women are wired differently. Men and women are wired differently. Just again, the way that men think and the way that they handle and the way that they process, the way that they bounce back and it's different from the way that we do it. It is completely different. There's no real purpose in this video. Okay. I just want to just go ahead and put that up there if you're watching this. So I just really wanted to talk about it because it was just interesting conversations. It's just interesting that so many people really don't understand it. And it's why I want more single women to really take the time to heal. And no, that is a word that I am never going to retire. I'm sure, knowing me, I will find different ways to word it, different synonyms, whatever the case might be. But healing means healing everything from your past, healing everything from your childhood, all of those childhood blockages, all of that trauma, the parental prohibitions. When I say that, I'm talking about things that we don't even realize that are prohibiting us from living healthy lives and having healthy love lives, all because of our parents. Refusing to take the time to heal is dangerous, because men will end up labeling you as one thing, all because they don't understand you. And many women, a lot of times, don't realize there's a problem either. That was also something that I had to explain to Mr. K, getting him to understand, because he was like, oh, I don't see, but how people can make the same thing. Like, how do you at some point not realize that you might not, that that you might be the issue? I'm like, again, because someone who has issues don't realize that they have an issue. We always say like the first step is acknowledging, but again, if you don't even realize there's a problem, then you don't realize there's a problem. And you can't fix the problem that you don't even know is there. And so this is why a lot of times I always tell ladies, like, stop, pause, and reflect. Like, I need you to just really evaluate and reflect on something, like really doing some self-reflection, and you'll end up getting more answers than you can ever realize. I did not know that I had a problem. I literally thought the problem was all the men that I was dating, which that should have told me something in and of itself. If all the men you were dating, you have a problem with all of them, you might be the problem. But no, I thought something was wrong with all of them. But again, after a while, it was just kind of like, all right, what's really going on here? And I think for me, it's just like I'm thankful for the relationship that I have with God, and I'm thankful that I pray for real, that I really do take the time to spend time with Him, and that my prayers are a lot of times about me and my heart, and that I really do take those prayers about wisdom to heart when I really do think about discernment and spiritual gifts and stuff like that, because I believe that it was only my relationship with God that really allowed me to have my eyes open to many things. And it was interesting because I knew it was like right when I went through the bulk of that healing process is when it was like literally like I felt his presence so strongly in my bedroom, in that house, where it was just I just like how you can just feel the presence of God, like, and it's just so thick, like it's palpable in that moment, where it was like him just letting me know, okay, finally, you got it. You got what I've been trying to get you to understand. So you continue to work on healing you. And there was also that same season, him letting me, okay, now that you also got it, I am now calling you to help other women with the same thing in the same area. And of course, initially I was like, whoa, you're moving a little too fast. Like I'm still processing all of this stuff. But I know it sucks sometimes being misunderstood. There are reasons why men don't always understand us, right? Because there are some things you probably don't even realize about yourself. There may be some things that you don't even identify that you are doing, in your life and in your relationships and the way that you are carrying yourself. But I'm going to say the same thing that I always say when it comes to men and women, when it comes to single men and single women, when it comes to single Black men and single Black women at the end of the day. I will always talk about that tug method, TUG, how we really need to call a truce, because it's like at the same time, it's like we're all out here on the same battlefield. And if we would really just learn how to fight the issues instead of fighting each other, we would get a lot further. I always say it's keeping in mind that a large percentage of us, and especially, my generation and my age range, a lot of us came from broken homes, right? Broken home syndrome is a real thing. So it's like realizing that men and women are affected differently. And then it's also keeping in mind, I always especially tell women this, we have to keep in mind because we do so much complaining about men today, this, forgetting that a large majority of us with our daddy issues and our abandonment, like a lot of us who came from single parent households, it's like we are seemingly forgetting that a lot of men came from single parent households. There are things that we did not learn until our 30s and 40s, and some of you, your 50s. So why are you thinking men are exempt from that? So it's like we need to call a truce and realize a lot of us came from the same things and we're just affected differently. And we're all just trying to find love out here in these streets. And then it's all about understanding. As I always say, we are in this thing together. So it's like if we would spend more time trying to understand each other versus fighting to be understood, we would get a whole lot further. And that G, I always say, offering grace, something that as believers, we're supposed to extend anyway. So it's like we need to learn how to extend a little bit more grace in our single season, and it's extending grace to a lot of the men that we do end up encountering and coming across, and keeping in mind that they are often fighting battles that we know nothing about. And I know because a lot of times it's like, oh, but I'm fighting stuff too. And what about me? And what about me? Go to the Lord. Okay. And yes, he can go to the Lord too, but I'm saying like we're just always like, oh, but what are we always being told this? And what about the men? And da 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 da. I need some of us to like really just throw ourselves at the feet of Jesus for real. Because some of us, we suck when it comes to extending grace. Some of us are really, really bad when it comes to extending grace. Some of us are really bad with banging the gavel and being judges when it comes to men and what they got going on, but we are great when it comes to being attorneys and advocating for our own issues and why we are the way that we are. Extending grace goes a long way. And if some of us would really change our mindsets and really renew our hearts, rewire our brains, you can actually find yourself experiencing the real love that you know deep down is what you are truly, truly desiring. So to you, I would say heal, take the time to identify any patterns because we all got them. If you're someone if you've been single for some time or if you've been dating for or whatever, there are some patterns, okay, at the end of the day. And when you really do heal and identify your patterns, that way you ensure that you have no excuses to some of the things that you are actually, portraying and displaying and going through the whole nine. And that is just that. So, like I said, no real purpose to this video at the end of the day. Okay. I just really just wanted to share, like I said, just some things as far as that conversation was concerned, in hopes that it would either, bless somebody, help somebody, and just kind of letting that be that. I am literally crying. I don't want anyone. Why are you crying? No, don't cry. Like, don't do that. I don't need anyone crying. I just really wanted to share. Sign me up. I don't know what you want to sign up for, but we can sign you up for whatever it is you want to sign up for. Okay. I love y'all, of course. Everything can be found at www.newthinglifecoaching. I know y'all see my lovely candle burning back there in the background. But if you love candles, that is another one of my top sellers, the New Me candle. Okay, like I love burning it because I love the scent of it. It's the lemon eucalyptus and peppermint, and that is on the site as well. But y'all be blessed. Have a happy Monday. Make sure you check out the podcast that I did earlier as well. Um, Helping ladies to determine one way that you can really figure out, like, if you are truly ready to love in this season. Um, I didn't really step on toes like that, I don't think. But I would just say go and check it out. You can find it. It's in the SAS tribe. I shared it in the group. If you're on the mailing list as well, you'll find it there. But you can also go to bit.ly/coach V podcast, all lowercase, all one word. If you do go to newthinglifecoaching.com, make sure that you subscribe to be on the mailing list if you want to be a part of the We Will Win challenge. I'm doing a free challenge. All you have to do is be on the mailing list, but it starts tomorrow. It is going to be a 7-day challenge. It is going to help you evolve and level up in some key areas, in some things that you have been kind of making your New Year's resolution probably for the past couple of years now. And it's just going to be a couple of minutes every day. You're literally going to get an email with a video where I'm just going to run my mouth for a few minutes. I'm going to talk. I'm going to give you a little passage. I'm going to pray. I'm going to give you a challenge and just give you a little bit of information about why you need to do better in a certain area and how to do better in that area, and what happens if you don't do better in that area when it comes to your 2023 and when it comes to your love life. So that We Will Win challenge, it is really just all about helping you to evolve so that you can eventually win at love in the future. All you have to do is be on the mailing list and you will get that delivered to your inbox every single day, because you already know my hashtag We Will Win. I mean it. We will win at Kingdom Love. That is God's love, self-love, and real love, right? With a good man, an amazing man, an MVP that I teach all of my clients about when it comes to New Heart Academy, because that is what I'm here to help ladies win at. But God bless y'all. Y'all have a fantastic night. All right. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.